Well, it was wonderful, and it's just a joy to wish Laura Mazel Tov because she's getting married, and Matt, yeah, God willing.
You know, it's funny. You were talking about you and Matthew being Facebook friends, and I said, I'm thinking to myself, God, was that back in the day of MySpace? Or what was that? What was that called?
That was
Right.
Was it
that
MySpace?
was before Facebook. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It is wonderful to have you here. It is a beautiful spring evening here in Southern California, and it is a joy to be together. And tonight is a very special Shabbat. In some ways, it's very sad, but very sweet, because tonight will be the last service that our dear friend Rabbi Joshua Hoffman will be leading for us and with us. And I did threaten to keep him on till midnight tonight, but this service will be plenty. And so we're delighted to tribute Rabbi Hoffman with tonight's service, to offer him all of our blessings and prayers as he goes off into the world to continue his wonderful teaching, his wonderful Torah, and to welcome my colleague Rabbi Farkas, to welcome my friend Cantor Fox, and to welcome all the friends from Valley Beth Shalom, and tonight to begin the leading of our service, Cantor Phil Barron.
And I'm going to teach a song, Rabbi, because this is one you will hear at our VBS Gala in a few weeks. And I hope you'll sing along right now. It goes like this. Hine matov manahi shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov manahi shevet achim gam yachad. Try it. Hine matov manahi shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov manahi shevet achim gam yachad. We come from a tale told long ago, passed on by the waves and the wind. We've made it this far together, you know. Come, brothers and sisters, let's sing. Hine matov manahim shevet achim gam yachad. 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 Come gather round and hear the song. If you're the wandering kind, you can make it alone. But just so you know, we leave no one behind. Come, mothers and fathers who've weathered the storms and grew strong in the trials of their times. So we, brothers and sisters, Lador, Vador, carry on with the song in our lives. Hine matov manahim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov manahim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov manahim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov manahim shevet achim gam yachad.
Shabbat Shalom to everyone, and welcome. We're delighted to have you with us tonight. We celebrate a beautiful Shabbat together. We take a moment just to, as we start this Shabbos, to share some thoughts with some dear friends. First of all, close to home, our community lost a dear friend this week, Rabbi Morley Feinstein, who's no relation except that he and I always ended up living close to each other. So I got his water bills and he got compliments on my sermons, and we shared life together. He was a wonderful teacher, a wonderful soul, and we miss him. He was taken from us this week by a terrible cancer. And as well, of course, in the news is the terrible news of the catastrophe in Meron in the north of Israel. 100,000 people gathered to celebrate the festival of Lag BaOmer, and whatever happened, the stampede, the crowds, and 50-something people are now, 45 people have died, and many, many, many more are injured. And our thoughts go to all of those families and to all of those communities, and our prayers for wholeness and for healing. But Shabbos is here, and that gives us a chance to sit back, to reflect, and to celebrate the gifts of life and the blessings we share. So we'll be davening from the Blue Sim Shalom prayer book. If you're in that prayer book, we begin Cantor, Shalom Aleichem, and then L'chuna Ranana.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi, Malachi Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh, Baruch Hu. Moachem l'shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi, Malachi Elyon. Mi melech, Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh, Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Shalom, Malachi Shalom, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Shalom, Malachi Shalom, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seitchem Shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi Hamlakim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. La 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 la. Ay la 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 la, ay la 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 la, ay la 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 la, ay la 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 la. Ay la 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 la, ay la 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 la, ay la 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 la, ay la la la. Seitchem Shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. L'chuna ranana, l'chuna ranana, l'chuna ranana l'Adonai, l'chuna ranana, l'chuna ranana, l'chuna ranana l'Adonai. Naria l'tzori sheinu nekarma panav b'toda. Naria l'tzori sheinu bil mirot naria lo. L'chuna ranana, l'chuna ranana, l'chuna ranana l'Adonai. L'chuna ranana, l'chuna ranana, l'chuna ranana l'Adonai. Ki el gadol Adonai, umelech gadol al kol Elohim. Ki el gadol Adonai, umelech gadol al kol Elohim. L'chuna ranana, l'chuna ranana, l'chuna ranana l'Adonai. L'chuna ranana, l'chuna ranana, l'chuna ranana l'Adonai. 40 שנה אקוט בדור, ואומרם טועה לבבי, והם לא ידעו דרכי, אשר נשבעתי באפי, אם יבואון אל מנוחתי. Or zaru ala tzadik la tzadik ule Yisrael simcha simcha la 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 la. Or zaru ala tzadik la tzadik ule Yisrael simcha simcha la 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 la. Or zaru ala tzadik la tzadik ule Yisrael simcha simcha la 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 la. Or zaru ala tzadik la tzadik ule Yisrael simcha la 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 la. Or zaru ala tzadik ule Yisrael simcha simcha simcha. Or zaru ala tzadik la tzadik ule Yisrael simcha simcha. Clap your hands. Or zaru ala tzadik la tzadik ule Yisrael simcha 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 la la. Or zaru ala tzadik ule Yisrael simcha simcha. Or zaru ala tzadik la tzadik ule Yisrael simcha simcha la 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 la. Or zaru ala tzadik ule Yisrael simcha simcha simcha. Or zaru ala tzadik la tzadik ule Yisrael simcha simcha la 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 la. Or zaru ala tzadik la tzadik ule Yisrael simcha simcha la 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 la. Ay 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 ay. And we are turning to page 19. Sing with me. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Ish tachavu lehar kosho. Ish tachavu lehar kosho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Rabbi Hoffman, so good to be with you this evening.
So good. I think we're going to rise now as we turn to page 20 for Psalm 29.
Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai dai dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai dai dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Kabbalat Adonai, v'hagra Rabbi Kol Adonai Bako Alai Kol Adonai Behadar Kol Adonai Shovei Vayishaver Adonai Et Arzei Halvanon Yarkirim Kemo Hegel Levando Vesirio Kemo Kevo Venrehimim Kol Adonai Say Ramotesh Kol Adonai Yafir Midbar Yafir Adonai Midbar Kadesh Kol Adonai Yechol Elayalot Vayecheso Yeharot Oh Echalo Kavo, lai, 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 Adonai, Ramabul, Yahshava, Yishev Adonai, Melech Leolam, Adonai Oz, Le'amo Yitein, Adonai Evarek, Et Amo Shalom, Yai, 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 Yai,
So when I first started at Valley Beth Shalom, I actually started a month before a typical contract begins in June, because that would be a great time for me to start learning the ropes of being a rabbi in a congregation. And it was especially timely because July was typically the month when the rabbis would take off, and Rabbi Shuai Zichrono Livracha was typically gone for both of the months during the summer. And it happened to be that on this particular summer, Rabbi Feinstein was going to be gone. So we spent a good month of June trying to learn not only where all the bathrooms are in the building and who you need to talk to about what, but there were a few moments because the school year was almost done. And there was one of the jobs that they didn't train you to do in rabbinical school, which was telling stories in the ECC. So Rabbi Feinstein said, "Can you tell a story?" And I said, "I think I can tell a story." And he asked, "Do you have any stories?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. What stories can I tell?" And very promptly, he went to his bookshelf and he pulled out a book and he handed it to me. And it was called like Great Jewish Stories. And he said, "Here, pick one and go for it." So I still have that book, and it turns out coincidentally that book was in the original possession of Susan North Gilboa, and I have that book. So Susan, if you are listening to this, I have your storybook, and it remains in my library. But it was also a lifesaver because I thought I knew how to tell stories, but I didn't know how to tell stories like Rabbi Ed Feinstein. And as we know, he's just a lyrical storyteller, has such an incredible gift. And what could it possibly mean for a new rabbi to tell a story at the feet of one of the greatest storytellers in our generation? So I found a story, and I listened very carefully to the way that I had heard Ed Feinstein tell stories before. And especially with children, there was one particular gift, and that he used very loud and silly voices. Again, something that you do not learn in Talmud class or in pastoral counseling. So there I was trying to tell a story and trying to discover the voice. And it's this story, I want to share it just in brief. because I've already done so much to introduce the story, but I wanted to share just one of my favorites because this was the story. And I've been telling this story now for 18 years for children in the ECC and kids at camp. And now I share it with you because it's one of my favorites. So the story as it is that there was a wonderful kingdom in an idyllic land, and the king lived up atop the hill where the village was down below. And he was a benevolent king, but very rarely seen. And the king had every delight at his fingertips and would ask for the most exquisite and rare delicacies to be brought to his dining table day after day and week after week. And he would sit down and he would enjoy this food. And there was just something missing. There was something missing. I mean, he went all over the world to find great food, and there was something missing. Something's missing so much that it prompted him to kind of go into the village and to discover what were his people eating, and maybe there would be something there that he would find that he could bring back home. So the king did not want to be discovered as being the monarch, and he dressed up in pauper's clothes, and he wore a rumpled hat, and he put some scruffy makeup on his face, and he went down into the village, and he slowly made his way through the streets, and he heard coming through a window a humming, a beautiful melody. And he started to peer in the window, and there was this man, and he was setting up this table, and it was a very simple table, and it was adorned with candlesticks, and there was a cup which was filled with wine on the table, and there was a plate with a piece of braided bread on the table. And the man sat down, and he was by himself, and he just started to sing the beautiful melodies of Shabbat. And the king wanted to learn more, so he knocked on the door, and the man opened up, and the king said, I'm a poor man just trying to find a little bit of extra food. Do you have any extra food to share with me? And the man inside the house said, of course, come in. It's Shabbat, please. Everybody's welcome at a Shabbat table. Please come and sit down and enjoy the food that we have. And the man began to serve him the food. And the king started to eat, and the man brought a bowl of soup, and he sat it before him, and it was very modest soup. There was nothing, almost nothing broth, and it just looked like maybe a piece of chicken. The king didn't know, and he tasted it, and something happened. Something happened inside his mouth, inside his belly, and he started to sing, and he started to yodel. It was an unbelievable noise that came out of his mouth. He would say inside of himself, delicious. The king, who was dressed as his pauper, never expressed anything like this before. And the man was so pleased. He said, you like it? And the king said, this is amazing. Please, please, please tell me, what did you put into this soup to make it taste so good? And the man said, it's very simple soup, but it has this one special ingredient. It's called Shabbat spice. And the king said, Shabbat spice, okay. So he finished the meal with the man. He went back home. He went up to all of his chefs, and he told all of his royal chefs, I want you to make me a feast with Shabbat spice. Go wherever you can in the world and find the spice. And he waited patiently, and all of his chefs, they all went looking for the Shabbat spice, but nobody could find it because Shabbat spice, where could you possibly find it? So they brought food for the king. They set for him a table. It looked just like the table in the man's house with all of the stuff, but as soon as the king tasted, it didn't have that flavor. So he dressed up. He went back down into the village. He found the man sitting at the table. He knocked on the door. The man opened up the door. He said, I'm still hungry. The man said, by all means, come in. He sat down. This time, he fed him a piece of chicken. And as the king took a bite out of the chicken, he said, delicious. It was the most amazing sound that he had ever heard come out of his own lips. And it was the most amazing food that he had ever eaten. Please, he asked the man, please tell me, where did you get the ingredients to make this chicken taste so delicious? And the man said, it's very simple. It's just Shabbat spice. Well, the king, as you can imagine, went back and tried to have Shabbat spice made, and it didn't work again. So then, whoops, there we go. So then the king went this time to the man, and he knocked on the door. But this time, as the man opened the door and he saw his friend dressed in a pauper suit, he said, "Oh, you're back." The man took off his hat. He opened up his coat and he said, "I'm the king." And the man said, "Your Majesty, I'm so sorry. I didn't recognize you. What are you doing in my home? Please come into my house." And the king said, "You don't understand. I've been coming and visiting your house, and you've been feeding me delicious food, and I cannot thank you enough for your generosity. But what I really want to know is, what is in that food? What is it that makes it taste so amazing? I have every kind of delicacy available to me. Why? Why can't I find this?" And the man said, "Shabbat spice. Shabbat spice, Your Majesty. It's not something that you find in the ground. It's not something that you mix up in a kitchen. Shabbat spice is that sweet taste that is only experienced when it's shared between friends, when it's shared at a table where love is expressed. And Your Majesty, it's been my honor to give you a little bit of my Shabbat spice." Well, the king was so blown away, and he was a little bit lonely all up on the hill. So you know what he said? "Will you come to my home and will you eat Shabbat dinner with me?" And the man was so honored. "Why, of course, Your Majesty." And so it was Shabbat next Friday night, and the man appeared at the house, and the table was set with all of the finest foods. There was more food. There was barely a place to sit. There was so much food. And there was the king on the one side of the table and the man on the other side of the table, and they took a bite of this unbelievable soup. And you know what? It happened. There it was inside of the belly of the king. Delicious! Shabbat spice. They found it in their friendship. So now you go home and you find some Shabbat spice and you share it with the ones that you love. Shabbat shalom. Let's turn to page 21 as we sing Lecha Dodi.
And actually, this is the nigun that they were singing at the beginning of the story. Yada da 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 da. Yada da 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 da. Yada da 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 da. Yada da 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 da. Yada da 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 da. Yada da 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 da. Lecha Dodi, לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi, לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, שם ולתפארת ולתהילה. Lecha Dodi, לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi, לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לא תבושי ולא תקלמי, מה תשתוכחי ומה תרמי. בך יחסו אני עמי, ונבנתה עיר על תהילה. Lecha Dodi, לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi, לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. ימין ושמאל תפרוצי, ואת אדוני תריצי. על יריש בן פרסי, ונשמחה ונגילה לך אדוני, לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה. לך אדוני, לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה. בואי בשלום עטרת בלה, גם בשמחה ובצולה. תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה, לך אדוני, לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה. לך אדוני, לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה.
Thank you. It's beautiful. Let's all stand up together. It's time for us to move into the evening prayers, the Ma'ariv prayers. They're found on page 28.
Baruch with Adonai, Hamevorach, Baruch Adonai, Hamevorach, Hamevorach, Le'olam Va'ed, Hamevorach, Hamevorach, Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch Adonai Vorach, Le'olam Va'ed.
Take your seats, our prayers. Go ahead. Please, go ahead.
Elechai v'chayav, Tamid yimloch aleinu, le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai, Hamariv Aravim.
Page 29, Ahavat Olam.
Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amecha v'dag. Torah u'mitzvot, hukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu, b'shocheveinu v'kumeinu, nasiach b'chukecha, v'nismach b'divrei toratecha, u'b'mitzvotecha, מעולם אבל כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגי יומם ולילה כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגי יומם ולילה כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגי יומם ולילה כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגי יומם ולילה ויעבדך הארץ תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל.
Shema Yisrael together, page 30.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך ובשורבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות בידיך ובישעריך וירושלים.
Take a few moments. The words of Shema Yisrael silently through page 31.
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
So another fun story about Valley Beshalom goes back about, almost 15 years ago to this Friday night program called Shabbos Fest. And Shabbos Fest was just a really wonderfully musical, delightful Shabbat experience for families. And Cantor, don't go away because you're the star of this. At first, it was led by Noreen Green. And do you remember the day she would like prance around the room and everybody was dancing? It was always around. I think it was either Lecha Dodi or sometimes it was Micha Mocha.
Both, yeah.
So what happened was one day, a few years after the Prince of Egypt had come out, you started to bring that melody, the melody that we're about to sing. Mm-hmm. And it was another, like, for all respect, I know this is my last Shabbat, but this is a great Ed Feinstein story that we all love. And I learned so much from him, so I want to share about it. And he's not on screen, so it's good. That means he must be like taking a nap because he's so busy. And he like, I think on the fly, I don't think that he pre-planned this. All of a sudden, he starts talking about how our ancestors were traveling to the sea in leading Egypt, and all of a sudden they heard this melody, and it was this melody that was played for generation after generation after generation, and it was carried all the way down throughout the generations, and it had a harmonica. Do you remember the harmonica? It had a harmonica. And basically, the harmonica was between two pieces of matzah. Do you remember this? And, yes. And all of a sudden, like, who makes up a story like this? I don't know. But all I know is that, like, I was so lucky to be in a place where stories like this could be created and shared and rejoiced and celebrated. And this song is just a sweet reminder of that. So maybe you can pull out that harmonica. And if not, maybe Cantor Baron, if you can pull out some of that tunes and help us sing.
I can do. I don't have the harmonica handy, but I remember the story, and it was because they were about to cross the Sea of Reeds, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
Harmonicas have reeds in them, and they had the matzah on their back. So what they did was they took the reeds, they put them between the two matzahs, and they blew and I had hidden in there an actual little tiny harmonica. And I actually had the matzah, so that was a lot of fun.
Brilliance,
We've
people.
had a lot of
Sheer
fun.
brilliance.
We have. But this, in fact, is based on a tune that you hear in The Prince of Egypt when the sea parts and they sing this. And we just came up with a new, what they call a middle 8 in songwriting. 8 bars right in the middle that happen to fit perfectly for the Malchutcha part of Micha Mocha. And it goes like this. Please sing along. Me. Chamocha bahilim Adonai mi Chamocha nedarba kodesh mi Chamocha bahilim Adonai nuratehilot oseh afele lai 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 Malchutcha Rahuvanecha Bokeh Ayom Lidnei Moshe Zeheli Anu Be'amru Adonai Himlo Le'olam Ba'en Yai Lai 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 me Chamocha bahilim Adonai mi Chamocha nedarba kodesh mi Chamocha bahilim Adonai nuratehilot oseh afele lai 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 ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
If I may, Cantor Baron, one thing I want to add is right before this prayer is just something that I will always cherish in learning from Rabbi Farkas, which was on the Shabbat following the Tree of Life shooting just a couple of years ago. And I'll never forget his talk because it was just so beautiful and poignant and timely. And he spoke about the redwood trees. And if you've ever heard the story of the great redwood trees, what happens is that the roots are very deep. And over time, the roots become interconnected. They rely upon each other in order to survive. So the forest, even though you look at it above ground as being single entities of trees, it's really the root system that's underneath that tells the true story, which is that not only are those trees all connected, but it's the same story about us. And the pain that we felt in the tragedy of that moment was something that Rabbi Farkas was just so sensitive and capable of bringing us together to feel that we had such a great loss in that tragedy. And I think we all feel it a little bit today with the story that just splashed across the headlines through every major news source about our brothers and sisters. And even though we might want to like hold our tongue in our cheek and say that, you know, COVID rules and proximity and 100,000 people is just completely ridiculous, the tragedy of lives that were lost for just completely accidental reasons tears our heart apart. And I thank you, Rabbi Farkas. I'll always hold on to that story, and I hold on to the wisdom that you shared with us. Let's hold that in mind as we share the prayer of Hashkivenu, page 33, if you're following along in the Siddur.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu Malkeinu l'chaim ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, ותגננו בעצה טובה מלפניך, והושיענו למען שמך. והגן בדינו, והסר מעלינו, אויב דבר וחרב ורע ויגון. והסר שטן מלפנינו ומאחרינו, ומצל כנפיך תסתירנו, כי אל שומרנו ומצילנו אתה, כי אל מלך חנון ורחום אתה. ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום, מעתה ועד עולם. ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, ברוך אתה אדוני, הפורץ סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים.
If you're able to stand, we rise as we prepare for the Amidah, first with Vishamru, page 34.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות ברית עולם. ואין יומי בני ישראל אותי לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, יברח ירותי וימלאו בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל. בגלה בגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי ולמעט יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לילה מן כל בירתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירון בעולמה ויאמרו
Amen. We take a few moments for private prayer, personal prayers, beginning on page 35, A or B through page 38. After the conclusion of your personal prayers this Shabbat evening, you can take your seats.
ואנחנו לא ולחיינו וישענו
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael v'chol eit v'chol shah bishlomecha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam.
Hadi Shalem, Rabbi Feinstein.
Cantor Fox, how about Kaddish Shalem?
Yidgalam Yidgalam Shemei Rabba Yol Mali Belakiro Devi Yamini Bakude Bechayikno Mekno Bechaylo Yisrael Vayalav Iman Gori Veimeru Amen Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach Reolam Uron Meolam Haya Yir Vorag Vishdaval Bin Boar Vidorona Sevita Darvita Levidalal Shemei de Kudisha Berichulei Lamingo Bagada Vishirat Shmagad Belakamato Miram Yom Vimeru Amen Hitkabel Soloton of Auto the Israel Kodam of Winishmaya Vimeru Amen Shlomar Rabba Min Shemaya Bechaim Oleinu Velkol Israel Vimeru Amen Shalom Mavias Shalom Aleinu Alkol Israel Vimeru Amen.
Aleinu l'shabeach, Cantor. Don't take off the guitar.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו ככל המונם ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהוא נוטה שמיים יסר ארץ. ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Once again, this Shabbos, we bring both the bitter and the sweet together with us as we begin the Shabbos. So our thoughts are with all of the families in Israel who have lost loved ones in the terrible tragedy of Meron this past week on Lag BaOmer. We pray that they find strength and healing in the memories left behind. As well, here in our own community, there were some significant deaths in the community at large. Our dear friend, Rabbi Morley Feinstein of the University Synagogue left us this week. Morley was a sweet and kind man who taught a beautiful Torah of love and warmth. And in the community at large, two very significant deaths. Bishop John Bruno, who led the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles, the Episcopal Church in LA, was a good friend of Valley Beth Shalom and a champion for social justice in our community, particularly concerned for the homeless in our community. Bishop Bruno came to our synagogue some years ago to teach and had such a warmth and wonderful way of finding his place in the shul, and told us that his grandchildren attend a Jewish nursery school and that he worked to maintain the Jewish Community Center of Silver Lake, the neighborhood in which he lives. And he was such a warm and loving man. We pray for his soul and the memory, may his memory be a blessing. And of course, today, Eli Brodt, the great philanthropist here in Los Angeles, champion of education and the arts, left us as well. Together with all of those who have lost to us from our own community, we remember all of them together. We ask you, if you will remember a loved one or observe a yard site, to rise now together and share the words of Kaddish with us together. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. V'yalma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechal Beit Yisrael. Bagalau v'zman kariv v'yimur amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam al me'almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnasei. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalau shemei dekutcha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemayim. V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Uyaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Thank you once again for joining us for Shul and for sharing these wonderful prayers with us tonight. A very special thank you to Cantor Barron, Cantor Fox, and to everyone who joined this evening. The Lag BaOmer holiday that we just celebrated is the one happy day in the 49 days of the Omer. The tradition is that the Omer is a time of some sadness in recognition of a plague that once affected the students of Rabbi Akiva, and of the plagues that have affected the great students of the rabbis in all the generations. But this day was singled out as a happy day because, ironically, it was the Yartzeit. It was the anniversary of the death of one of the great rabbis, one of the great students of Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And he decreed upon his death that he wanted his followers to celebrate his life and not to be drawn into sadness. And the principal story of Shimon Bar Yochai, we're going to talk about it tomorrow morning at Torah study, is a remarkable story, a very famous story that occurs in Talmud Shabbat. It's said that after the death of his teacher, Rabbi Akiva, who was tortured to death by the Romans in a public forum so that everyone would see what happened when you resisted the might of the Romans, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai gave up on the world that he lived in. He simply could not share the world with the Romans any longer. And he retreated. He retreated with his son Eliezer into a cave and spent 12 years in hiding in a cave. And there, according to the tradition, he created the mystical traditions of the Jewish faith. But that notion of a rabbi who says, I want nothing to do with the world. I want to find God in my solitude. I want to find God far away from the community and its business and its issues and its problems. I want nothing to do with the material world, with the economic world, with the political world. I want nothing to do with the struggle of human beings to live in the world. I want nothing to do with anyone. I want no community. The retreat into solitude, into monasticism, was what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai chose. That's where he found his spirituality. That's where he found God. But the story is that God found him, and God commanded him to leave the cave, and God commanded him to come and to live in the world, because God wanted him to understand. And I think it's the Jewish tradition that embraced this truth, that God is found in the connections among us. God is found when we help and we heal and we teach and we care, and we reach out a hand to one another and make the world a little more gentle for each other and a little more welcoming for each other. That was the great truth of Shimon Bar Yochai. And that's the truth that we celebrate this last week at ILOVEVBS. And there's almost nobody in the world I know who embodies that truth better than my dear friend, Rabbi Joshua Hoffman, who is always has a smile on his face, who is always welcoming in his countenance, who is always welcoming children and seniors and grown-ups and Jewish people and non-Jewish people and people of every background and of every quality and of every faith into his presence. There are very few people in the world who make you feel good just by being in their presence. And Rabbi Hoffman happens to be one of these people. He has really learned and has really lived and has really taught the great truth that Shimon Bar Yochai discovered. God is found in the connections between us, in the love among us, in the support that we share with each other, and in the moments that we celebrate together. And tonight is Joshua's last service for Valley Beth Shalom, but I understand he'll stick around the community. We all know where he lives. So I look forward to learning with him and celebrating with him and having moments with him in the years to come as an old friend. And Joshua, we offer you all of our blessings, all of our gratitude, and all of our celebration from all of the families of Valley Beth Shalom, all the children, all of the leadership, all the kids, all of the students, all of the rabbis, all of the teachers, everyone who has shared your Torah. We thank you and wish you Shabbat Shalom, a Shabbos of peace, and a wonderful blessing in the years yet to come. Cantor, let's finish our service with a little bit of bracha, a little bit of joy.
Okay.
A little kiddush, maybe, a little wine.
Little candles and then a little kiddush.
I'm feeling kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav Mitzivanu lehadlik ner Mitzivanu lehadlik ner Mitzivanu lehadlik ner Shel Shabbat
Cantor Fox.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Orei peri hagafen Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'yava uvratzon inchilanu zikaron lemahaseh v'reishit Ihu yom techila lemikra kodesh zecher litziat mitzrayim ki evanu v'chayda v'odanu gidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodecha v'ava uvratzon in choltonu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen.
Cantor, we have a closing prayer.
We do. Love you, Josh. Adon Olam. Asher malach v'terem kol Yitzir nivra le'yet nasa v'chefso kol Azai melech shemo nikra ve'acharei niklot hakol levado yimlog nora v'hu haya v'hu hoved Adon Olam, Sher Malach,
ki ruchi ve'tisha ve'oira ve'im ruchi geviati Adonai li Elohira Adonai olam shermala terem kol sir nevra yek nasa so cold as I'm at Shamoning. Your turn. I don't know now. They're my life. The terem call. Sinibra. The Nasa. The kept so cold as I'm at Share one more time. I don't know long. Share my life. Terem kol, tir nevra, yek nasan, kem so kol, azay melech shemo nevra.
Good Shabbos, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, Phoenix Baron, Phoenix Ginsburg.
You want to wait?
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom, Shabbat
Rabbi,
shalom,
Rabbi Josh.
Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom.
Love you.
Shabbat shalom.
Only Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom.
A Broadway star.
I don't know who rocks out. Good Shabbos to everyone. All the best.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Hi, everybody. Good night. Have a great night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Sending love.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos, Shabbos.